So the first one is what we discussed about dependency injection using a Java configuration. Okay, um, that's one approach, and another approach is using a annotation based dependency injection. Okay, so what is an annotation? What is an annotation like? I think we have already started using annotation, but what is an annotation? What it does? Any answers? Okay, so let me tell you. Annotations are introduced from JDK 5.0 onwards. Um, when the annotations are introduced, a lot of frameworks have started using annotation to do a lifecycle management of bean lifecycle management. So first of all, annotation is actually a passive component. It doesn't do anything itself. Okay, it is just a marker interface kind of stuff. It'll just go and mark your piece of the code at the different level, either at the class level or a method level or at the attribute level. Okay, so it'll go and mark at the different levels, and there is a separate active piece of the code which will go and scan your annotations in those classes and attach the behavior to it. Okay, that's a whole concept about an annotation. Annotation itself is a passive. It doesn't do anything by itself. Okay, it's like if I want to pass some metadata, it just takes a configuration of metadata, but it doesn't do anything itself. Behind the scene, some piece of the code will go and scan that annotation, and that junction, what you wanted to add a behavior, it will go and add those behaviors part of it. Okay, so that's an annotation. So when the annotation came into an existence in the Java, and many framework like Spring is actually went ahead and added the lifecycle management. Similarly, Spring actually wanted to support the annotation-based dependency injection. Okay, in terms of that, it's created this another approach of doing an dependency injection using annotation. So here, if you look at what we have discussed, creating a bean using a Java configuration, I use this annotation, which is a Java configuration. Inside that, I'm creating a bean. So this Java class is a separate configuration class. It is an external to my business logic. And I use this Java configuration to explicitly create all the beans definition. Okay. Here, the configuration is external to my bean classes, and that means all the configuration will go into this Java configuration, which having a separation of concern and also Java-based dependency injection. It is. Yeah, somebody is asking question. Okay, okay. If no questions, uh, using this annotation approach, okay, the way I do is this is my business logic, business class. Like a transfer service implementation, which is an implementation of transfer service interface. Okay. Now, for now, what I do from the previous dependency injection, I created the separate Java class to create all the beans. Like here is what I'm creating a bean using this transfer service, and it runs a transfer service object where I'm annotating this as a bean. And this I'm doing it in a Java configuration. Okay. And here is the definition to create this object and do a dependency injection. Okay, this is how I do in the Java configuration. In case of our annotation, I will not have this class itself. Java configuration class, I will not have it. Instead, I will go and open this transfer service implementation class, okay, and I will go and add an annotation to mark that class as a Spring Bean to instruct my configuration application context to pick up and create it as a bean. Okay, so what I do is, first thing is, for the transfer service implementation, I'll go and add this annotation, which is a component. Okay, and what it means is, when I go and create an application context, Java configuration, I will have no beans. Okay, but I will have another special instructions to go and scan these classes, which has a component annotation. Okay, so first thing is, I will go and create add this annotation in the class business class itself. And if I wanted to do any dependency injection, okay, let's say I have an account repository, I wanted to inject it. So in that case, I will go and add to that another annotation, which is an auto wired to this constructor. Whatever I'm doing a dependency injection to this constructor, and these constructors need to get injected this object type as an account repository. This has to happen automatically. So these are the two configuration instructions I'm going to provide in the business classes itself. Okay. Now all these annotations are now embedded in the Pojo itself. Okay. If you open this Java configuration class, it is having no beans definition anymore, because I'm instructing in the business class saying that this is a bean and this is the dependency injection to be done. That's all. Okay. And my now Java configuration class looks empty. Only instruction what I need to provide is, I need to go and add an instruction to go and scan this at component auto-wire annotations. And at component, moment I found the component Java classes, I will turn this guy as a bean. And moment I find the auto-wire, I will go and find out based on this account repository class type, I will go and fetch bean based on this class type from the container. I'll get injected. So using this, I can do that. Okay. So this has to be done by some piece of the code. Somebody has to go and scan this class and take an action whenever I have found these annotations. For that, in the Java configuration class, I will go and add one more instruction saying that do a component scan. One more annotation. This is like component scan annotation with a base package as this com.bank. Under this package, any classes which has this annotation will get scanned and created as a bean. Okay, and if there is any annotation which is like auto add, it will go and search based on the class type, which is an account repository from the application context. If it is there, it will inject the type, okay, and create an object for you. So this is the only configuration you need to add it in the Java configuration file. So once you are done with this Java configuration file, you can go and create an application context too in the normal way. These are the very high level basic things.
Manju, I have a question. So the default behavior for a bean creation is we should have an empty constructor, right?
Right.
So in this case, what we are doing is we have a constructor which has a parameter, right?
Yes.
So so just because I'm putting the auto wired, it automatically detects that, because if we don't have to do this in Spring, if we have to do it manually, if I have to call this constructor, the calling place, whether it's a class or an application, would actually pass in the parameter.
That's right.
So, but here what we are doing is we are saying auto wired, and then we are asking Spring to pass in the parameter. This is different, right?
It looks different, but there are two kinds of dependency injections. One is like constructor dependency injection and setter dependency injection. So both are supported by Spring.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So now the way the auto wire works is at the different level. I can go and add this auto wire to the constructor, and I can go and add this auto-wire at the method level. This is the method dependency injection. I can also go and add the dependency at the auto-wire at the field level. It's a field injection. So constructor injection, method injection, and field injection. Okay. In all the cases, the basic by default, it is going to look at the type, class type. If do I have any beans with the class type as account repository in the container? If it is there, it will take that bean object reference and inject it to this method, this class or constructor. Okay, that's a default way it will work. So one thing is when you do a dependency injection at the field level, okay, it will become a little harder to do write a unit test case because I cannot access the private variable. I cannot go and put the stubs. Okay, unit testing will become a little tough to do it unless you go and have the setter methods for this. Okay, just keep this in mind if you're writing a unit test cases. So AutoWire, in this case, if you look at dependencies, by default, when you say AutoWire, you must need to have the dependency object to be injected. Okay, and if you want to make it optional, okay, you can actually go and add this parameter to it for the AutoWire saying that required equal to false. By default, the required equal to be true. Okay, in that case, if the dependency dependent object is not there in the container, it will stop creating a context. It will throw an exception, and if there is no dependency found. In case of here, if there is no account repository, and since you made this as a required false, okay, if it is there, then only it will inject. If it is not there, it will just continue with the next steps. It doesn't stop you to creating a context. In this case, it will stop the context creation by throwing an exception. It will stop. That's the difference between overriding this attribute. Okay. And in case of auto wiring, okay, if I have like two different implementations of account repository, yeah, I have account repository which has like Hibernate account repository and JDBC account repository. So which one will it pick up? Is it like Hibernate account repository or JDBC when I do AutoWire of account repository? Which one does it pick up? As I said, it is based on the account repository class type. As long as the account repository implementation is only one, then only this AutoWire will be able to get inject that object. Moment I have found that two different objects are created, which was of the same type, account repository, then Spring will get into confusion. It doesn't know what to do, which one to pick up. What it does is it will throw an exception saying that no such bean definition because there is no unique bean type. Okay, you are expected to have a single one, but it found two. Okay, it will throw this exception and stop creating an application context. So now you need to go and resolve this ambiguity manually. Okay, how will I create? How will I resolve this manually? Okay, and the way I do it is I will go and add an explicit ID and do qualifying to it. Okay, now let's say the by default. Okay, here if you look at by default, the name of the bean is a class name. That's the default behavior. When I say component, the bean ID will be the class name. Here like transfer service implementation is a class name. T will be small letter. Rest of the things will follow as it is. And this becomes a bean ID for this object. Okay. In this case, by default, Hibernate account repository H is small and JDBC account repository J is small. And these are the IDs. And these IDs will be generated by system automatically. Okay, that's the by default behavior. Okay, and if you wanted to override, you can override by providing the ID within the component. Okay, so the way I do that overriding is, what I do is I'll go and add an explicit IDs for these two beans, Hibernate and JDBC. I'll go and add this JDBC account repository and Hibernate account repository. I will not rely on the system generated ID. I'll go and add the bean ID explicitly. Okay, when I add it, okay, I need to pick up one of this implementation of account repository to qualify it, to inject here. So here when I do AutoWire, since I found two implementation, I need to resolve manually. The way I resolve this manually is using this qualifier annotation. In the qualifier, I add this qualifier to pick up this JDBC account repository bean ID. So that means this implementation object, and that object gets injected to this account repository object, part of the constructor. That's how I go and resolve it using a qualifier annotation. Okay, the qualifier I can use it at the same level wherever I have added this annotation. Okay, auto add at the different levels. Okay, you can go and use it at the method level, also field level. So not have, and this is to be used only when there is a two implementation of the same interface is available. Okay, always the recommendation is whenever you wanted to qualify, don't rely on the system generated ID, because moment you start using the ID, it will prone to not to do a refactoring of your code. Okay, so if your system generated ID, if you don't add this, if you directly use JDBC account repository as a system generated ID here, okay, when I go and change the class name, JDBC account repository to something else, then I need to go and change this ID as well. Okay, to avoid that, so what I do is I go and add this bean ID explicitly using the component, and even if I go and change this class name, this will be remains as it is, and this will just connected as it is with the bean ID. I don't need to worry about even if there is a refactor of the class name. Okay, so don't rely on the system generated ID. Always use an explicit ID to connect and qualify with it. Okay, so components can the component so component names, as I said, that first letter will be a small D capitalized, rest of the things as it is, that is the default name, and the class name will be default. And as I said, that never rely on the system generated ID, because one of the things is where it will have a problem when you do a refactoring. Okay, and especially you go for the bean ID specifying only when you have an disambiguation to resolve it, when the two beans having a implemented with the same interface. Okay, so only in that case you go and change the name. So if you compare between the Java configuration and annotation, here the scope, I can go and say the scope as a prototype using this annotation. You can use the same annotation in the annotation as well, like scope is annotation, which you can by default scope is always a singleton if you don't specify. If you want to explicitly say that, you can go and add this. To provide the name, component will have the name also, and here if you want to specify the name, by default method will be ID, or you can also specify within the bean tag. Okay, and there is one more annotation which is a lazy init. By default, all the beans will get created upfront. Okay, for some reason I don't want it to create a beans upfront when the context is getting created. I want to just delay it, delay the object creation. Create the object only when I request. Okay, in that cases, okay, you can actually use this lazy. Okay, by default lazy will be disabled. If you want to enable, you can go and enable it. True or false. Okay, that's advantage, but try to not to use this lazy unless you want it and you have a justified reason to use it, because this may create a problem in many cases. Okay, so similar options are available in annotations as well compared to the Java configuration. So that's all. I think we'll break for now. Rest of the things will continue in the tomorrow's class. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah. Any other questions
Yeah.
so far?
No, no, Manju. Yeah, yeah. About to go. So, thank you for the session.
Welcome.